Have you ever stared at a challenge at work? Maybe a project that's stalled, a team that isn't quite gelling, or, a new initiative struggling to gain traction and wondered, what's the real problem here?
Oh, absolutely. It's a moment we all face, I think. Whether you're leading a huge company, managing a small startup, or even just trying to figure out your own workflow.
Exactly. And in that moment, our minds often jump to a fork in the road. Do we need better people, more talent?
Or should we pour resources into training our existing team? Sharpen their skills, maybe instill greater discipline, or just tell everyone to try harder.
Right. Or is the issue something far more fundamental, something maybe embedded in the very fabric of how things are done around here?
Like the structure itself, the processes we always follow, maybe even the culture of the organization.
Precisely. And this isn't just some fleeting modern workplace thing. This is actually one of the oldest, most enduring debates in management thought. It's a tension that's shaped how we think about performance for decades.
It really has. Is the ultimate key to unlocking peak performance primarily about the individual, their skills, their drive, their sheer effectiveness?
Or is it overwhelmingly about the overarching system they operate within? That kind of invisible environment that either lets their brilliance shine or, holds them back.
It's a fascinating, almost existential question for anyone working in an organization, isn't it?
It really is. So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into this very fundamental tension. We'll be exploring two powerful, yet seemingly opposing perspectives that have profound implications for how we lead, manage, and even how we view our own contributions.
Yeah, on one side, we'll delve into the formidable arguments championed by figures like Peter F. Drucker. He strongly believed that the disciplined, highly effective knowledge worker is the ultimate lever for success.
So that perspective really focuses on what you as an individual can do, right?
Mm,
Emphasizing self-management, personal accountability, and just a relentless focus on results.
exactly. And then we'll draw from a really rich tapestry of other influential thinkers, from organizational behaviorists to economic strategists. These thinkers compellingly argue that individual performance, even, sheer brilliance, is overwhelmingly shaped or amplified or maybe even stifled by the system itself.
So that viewpoint suggests that systemic improvements like designing better processes, fostering a more adaptable culture, maybe restructuring how decisions get made, those are the true starting point for any meaningful, lasting change.
Precisely. So our guiding question today is exactly this. Where should a company, or really any organization, could be a nonprofit, could be a sports team, where should it focus its improvement efforts?
Should it be on making its individual executives and employees more effective, sharper, more disciplined, kind of honing the players?
Or should it be on fundamentally improving the overall system, the environment, the rules of the game they're playing in?
This deep dive is really custom tailored for you, the learner. Our mission is to unpack these powerful viewpoints, highlight the crucial details, share some surprising facts maybe.
And help you extract those aha moments, those insights that give you a shortcut to being truly well informed on this.
Exactly. We want to empower you with knowledge you can actually apply without hopefully overwhelming you with just tons of information.
All right, let's jump right into it then.
Okay, let's start by looking at the incredibly compelling case for focusing on the individual. I mean, if you pick up Peter F. Drucker's foundational work, especially The Effective Executive, you quickly get this sense of his profound, almost unwavering belief in the power of individual discipline, conscious effort.
Yeah, and Drucker drops kind of truth bomb right from the start, doesn't he? He says effectiveness isn't some innate charisma or a natural gift or personality trait you're just born with.
Right. It's a discipline, something anyone can master, a skill that is learned and earned through practice.
And that's such a crucial distinction because it immediately challenges that common idea that only, naturally gifted or super charismatic leaders can be highly effective. Totally. And Drucker's core insight, which I think sometimes gets overlooked, is that it's not just about doing things right, being efficient following procedures.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making sure you're getting the right things done. That's the key phrase.
Think about that project you're pushing or that task dominating your calendar. Are you busy optimizing a process that maybe shouldn't even exist? Drucker forces you to ask that uncomfortable but, incredibly liberating question.
It's a total paradigm shift, really, and he breaks this discipline down into concrete, actionable practices. Like, for instance, a core habit of effective executives is just ruthlessly defining desired results.
So an effective individual doesn't just show up and get busy. They ask specific outcome-oriented questions. Like, what contributions should the enterprise expect from me over the next, say, 18 months to 2 years?
Yeah, or what results will I commit to? With what deadlines? It's not just about output, it's about measurable impact and having a clear line of sight to the bigger strategic objectives.
And hand in hand with defining results is the power of concentration. This one feels almost impossible today.
Oh, tell me about it. Drucker famously stressed that effective executives simply do not splinter themselves. In our modern notification-crazy world, that's a radical concept.
He advocated focusing on one task if possible, or at most two tasks simultaneously.
Yeah, he even claimed he'd never encountered an executive who remains effective while tackling more than two tasks at a time. That's a pretty stark counterpoint to the multitasking culture many of us live in, where juggling 10 priorities is almost seen as a badge of honor.
It really is. And what's more, Drucker emphasized that this isn't just a static list you check off. After you complete that original top priority task, you don't just blindly move to item number 2 on some old list.
Right. Instead, you reset priorities. You ask, what must be done now? This ensures you're always working on what's most relevant, preventing, outdated objectives from sucking up valuable energy when the landscape inevitably shifts. It's a constant process of recalibration.
So smart. Building on that, effective individuals are also exceptionally skilled at leveraging their strengths and, maybe just as importantly, wisely identifying what not to do.
Yeah, Drucker highlighted that we all have a vast number of areas in which we have no talent or skill and little chance of becoming even mediocre. Kind of blunt, but probably true.
So his advice: waste as little effort as possible on improving areas of low competence.
Exactly. Instead, he advocates for a really significant shift in focus. Energy, resources, and time should go to making a competent person into a star performer.
That really challenges a lot of traditional HR practices, doesn't it? Where the focus is often on fixing every perceived weakness through remedial training, rather than just amplifying existing talents.
It absolutely does. It's a very pragmatic, almost Darwinian approach to personal development, and it extends to how you manage your time and contributions within a team.
How so?
Well, effective individuals actively seek to get rid of anything that can be done by somebody else so that one does not have to delegate but can really get to one's own work.
So it's not just about offloading tasks you don't like. It's about ruthlessly maximizing your unique, most valuable contribution.
Precisely. And here's a truly insightful, maybe slightly uncomfortable point he makes. A hallmark of an effective executive is the willingness to systematically ask colleagues, what do I do that wastes your time without contributing to your effectiveness?
Ooh, I can just imagine the awkward silence after that question pops up in a meeting.
Right. But it shows a powerful combination of self-awareness and a deep commitment to optimizing collective efficiency, not just your own personal output.
That makes sense. And beyond just efficiency and output, there are critical ethical boundaries that effective individuals must honor.
Absolutely. Drucker insisted that before acting, executives must consider fundamental restraints. Ask, is this course of action ethical? Is it acceptable within the organization? Is it legal? Is it compatible with the mission, values, and policies of the organization?
And he argues that while positive answers don't guarantee effectiveness, ignoring these is a sure way to fail, right?
Exactly. He says, violating these restraints is certain to make it both wrong and ineffectual. It's not just a suggestion, it's an absolute precondition. It anchors individual action within a broader moral and organizational framework.
It also leads into his famous we mentality, doesn't it? Despite this intense focus on individual contribution and responsibility.
Yeah, he emphasizes don't think or say I. Think and say we. Effective executives understand they have ultimate non-delegable responsibility for outcomes, but their authority, their ability to get things done, stems from the trust of the organization.
So it's not about dodging personal accountability. It's about recognizing that your individual agency operates within and relies upon a collective purpose and shared trust. You're responsible for your part, but you succeed with others.
Beautifully put. And this individual focus extends to our internal capacities, too. Drawing from Daniel Goleman's work, What Makes a Leader, self-awareness is highlighted as just crucial, a key component of emotional intelligence.
How does that manifest in practice?
Well, it shows up as candor, as realistic self-assessment. It enables people to openly discuss their emotions and how they directly impact their work. Goleman gives this great example of a manager.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she was initially resistant to a new service, but then she openly confessed, look, I really wanted to run the project, but I wasn't selected. Instead of letting that personal disappointment derail things, Her self-awareness allowed her to acknowledge her feelings, process them, and then actively choose to support the service fully.
Wow. That conscious shift from personal emotion to objective support, that's emotional intelligence in action right there.
Exactly. And crucially, Goleman notes that emotional intelligence, which includes self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skill, isn't some fixed trait you're born with.
Right, it develops over time.
Typically increases with age, he says, and significantly, it can be learned and cultivated. Which brings it right back to Drucker's point about effectiveness being a discipline, not just a gift. It's about conscious development.
Okay, so when it comes to empowering others through this individual effort, Stephen Covey has some powerful ideas too, particularly around delegation.
Oh, yes. In The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Covey highlights stewardship delegation as this transformative approach. It's not just barking orders, right?
Now, it involves focusing on desired results, setting clear guidelines, providing the necessary resources, defining accountability, and understanding the consequences rather than micromanaging the how-to methods.
Covey tells this personal story about helping his young son with yard work. He didn't just do it for him or even tell him exactly how. He worked with him, guiding him to take ownership of his own stewardship, his own area of responsibility.
And what was the outcome?
It built immense trust. It empowered the son to take full ownership, leading to better results and, more importantly, building the son's self-management skills. Covey says, trust is the highest form of human motivation. But crucially, he adds, it requires training and development to raise competency. It's an investment from both sides.
That makes sense. Trust plus competence. And building on that relationship aspect, there's also the idea of managing upwards, managing your boss.
Right. Managing Your Boss by Gabaro and Cotter. It places a significant and maybe often overlooked burden squarely on the subordinate.
What do you mean by burden?
Well, it asserts that you, as the employee, are fundamentally responsible for understanding your boss's expectations, both the big picture, strategic stuff, and the specific tactical details.
Even if the boss isn't great at communicating them.
Especially then, it means proactively seeking information. They suggest practical tactics, like maybe drafting detailed memos, outlining your understanding of priorities and plans, and then presenting them for approval and discussion. It forces clarity.
So effective managers see this not as an extra chore, but as a core part of their job.
Exactly. They recognize that proactively managing this relationship isn't a burden. It's a legitimate and essential part of their work. It's crucial for their own achievements and for navigating all those dependencies within the larger organization. They don't resent the effort. They see it as strategically necessary.
Okay, so Drucker and Goleman give us this picture of the balanced, self-aware, disciplined executive. But some individual leaders seem to operate on a completely different level, almost breaking the mold. Elon Musk comes to mind.
Yeah, Ashley Vance's biography of Musk gives us a fascinating and sometimes maybe unsettling counterexample to these measured approaches. Vance recounts how Musk might deny requests for, say, essential $200,000 machines for SpaceX, deeming them non-critical,
Okay.
but then turn around and spend similar amounts on factory aesthetics like fancy paint jobs or robots, purely to inspire the team. Or refusing to pave a crucial short path for moving massive rockets, forcing engineers to move them like ancient Egyptians with wooden planks, just for the perceived lesson in resourcefulness.
That's mind-boggling. Talk about extreme individual prioritizing a grand vision over immediate practicalities.
It really is. Vance suggests Musk seems to feel for the human species as a whole without always wanting to consider the wants and needs of individuals. It paints this picture of a grand individual vision, a man on a quest, that prioritizes some macro-human future over immediate individual comforts or even, operational common sense sometimes.
It's definitely an extreme demonstration of the power of individual vision, even if it seems to come at a cost to the people around him.
It certainly highlights how singular individual drive, sometimes bordering on the seemingly irrational, can override conventional logic in some unique cases.
So summing up this first part, this whole focus on the individual is incredibly empowering, isn't it? It tells you, the listener, that you have immense agency, that your choices, your discipline, your self-management are primary drivers of success, not just for you, but for the whole organization.
Yeah, it emphasizes that while external circumstances obviously matter, your ability to master yourself and your contributions is a powerful force. It can potentially move mountains.
But, and there's always a but.
There usually is. While that individual agency is undeniably a powerful lever, it's striking how often even the most brilliant efforts can just hit a wall. or conversely, be magnified beyond measure purely because of the larger system they're operating in.
So many influential thinkers would argue the system can often kind of predetermine outcomes, making individual heroics less impactful than just smart systemic design.
That's the argument. The system can, in many ways, set the stage for success or failure, almost regardless of the talent of the individual players on that stage.
That's a really powerful idea. The notion that even a super effective Drucker-style executive could find themselves battling a stacked deck just because of the system.
Hmm.
Can you help us visualize what those systemic barriers actually look like? What's a common, maybe invisible issue that can derail individual brilliance?
Absolutely. One of the most insidious systemic barriers comes from what strategic flexibility by Hemmel, Prahalad, and Thomas calls organizational routines and core rigidities.
Routines and rigidities.
Okay. Yeah. Firms are, in essence, repositories of routines. Think standardized procedures, established ways of doing things. Now, while these routines provide capacity and efficiency, they can also inadvertently suppress attention span and capacity to absorb new information.
So it's like that brilliant blacksmith who perfected horseshoes but completely missed the invention of the car because his core competence and routines blinded him.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. This can lead to what they call a core rigidity or a competence trap, where a firm becomes stuck with what they have and have to live with what they lack.
So imagine that brilliant engineer we talked about proposing a radical new product.
Right. But the company's entrenched routines for product development or market research or even just internal budgeting simply can't accommodate it. The system essentially makes the individual's innovation totally ineffectual. Not because of a lack of talent, but because the structure itself is just too rigid to adapt.
That sounds a lot like the classic innovator's dilemma.
It absolutely does. And that book illustrates this perfectly with the example of Quantum Corporation. They were a leading maker of 8-inch hard drives back in the early 80s.
Okay.
When 5.25-inch drives emerged, a disruptive technology initially seen as inferior, Quantum completely missed the boat. They introduced their versions almost 4 years late.
Wow. 4 years is an eternity in tech.
It really is. And this wasn't necessarily a failure of individual engineers or executives. It was a systemic challenge rooted in the established company's focus, its existing lucrative customer base, who still wanted the 8-inch drives, and its internal processes for allocating resources. Their entire system was optimized for the existing market, making it inherently difficult, almost impossible, to pivot to a new, initially less profitable market for smaller drives.
And the source even notes that just inventing something first doesn't guarantee success, right? The system around adoption matters more.
Precisely. Pioneering a technology doesn't guarantee competitive advantage. The system around adoption, market penetration, economic viability, that often matters much more than the initial invention itself.
And we see these systemic forces at work in broader market structures too, not just inside companies. The whole industry can become a system that constrains individual players.
Absolutely. Michael Porter, in his classic Competitive Strategy, explains that in industries with undifferentiated products, think basic commodities, stuff where it's hard to stand out, costs are crucial to competition.
Makes sense. Price becomes the main lever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this creates immense pressure to have large, modern plants to be competitive and adequate capacity to achieve their target market share, which often leads to systemic overbuilding across the entire industry.
So everyone builds too much capacity just to keep up on cost.
Pretty much. And this isn't about one individual executive making a bad call. It's a systemic industry dynamic. It impacts every single company within that market, regardless of the individual skill or brilliance of their executives. Everyone is essentially forced to play a certain game by the inherent rules and economics of that system.
So even the sharpest individual CEO can't just wish away those overarching industry dynamics.
Not usually, no. Now let's flip this around. Let's talk about how systemic design and structure can be intentionally used to amplify individual performance.
Okay, so how do you build a system that empowers people?
Well, Extreme Ownership by Willink and Babin gives a fantastic example. The success of decentralized command within U.S. Navy SEALs, instead of a rigid top-down structure where orders flow one way. Subordinate leaders were empowered to not just tell me what the situation was, but what they were going to do to fix it. Think about that. They weren't just reporting problems, they were proposing solutions.
That's huge. So it frees up senior leadership.
Exactly. This radical empowerment allowed top leadership to focus on the bigger picture, the overall strategy. It shows how a well-designed system enables agility, fosters initiative, and crucially, prevents those bottlenecks at the top. It's all about, as they say, radical sharing of information with extreme decentralization of decision-making authority, pushing power to the edges.
So the structure itself isn't just a container. It actively becomes the enabler, or maybe even a constraint sometimes.
Yeah.
That really shifts the focus from who is in charge to how we're organized, doesn't it?
It fundamentally does. And Team of Teams by General McChrystal and his co-authors elaborates on this even further. They found that in complex, rapidly changing environments like the Iraq War, traditional military command structures, the neat org charts with straight lines, right angles, were proving utterly ineffective against agile, networked insurgents.
Because the enemy wasn't playing by those rules.
Exactly. They quickly found themselves literally drawing tangled networks on whiteboards just to represent how information actually flowed and how decisions really needed to be made. This led them to create a fusion of radical sharing of information with extreme decentralization of decision-making authority.
So it underscores that the structure itself, the architecture of communication and decision-making, can dictate effectiveness in a complex world, often more so than the brilliance of a single commander trying to micromanage everything from the top down.
Precisely. The system has to match the environment.
This reminds me so much of Jim Collins' distinction in Built to Last. He talks about clock builders versus time tellers. That seems incredibly relevant here.
Oh, it's absolutely a critical distinction for understanding systemic impact. A time teller, Collins says, is a great leader, a visionary, maybe charismatic, someone who can inspire and direct.
Like Zenith's Commander McDonald he mentions.
Right. But their profound impact often leaves when they leave. The organization falters without them. A clock builder, however, like Motorola's Paul Galvin, creates an enduring company, a company with the ability to continually reinvent itself with bold goals, long after the founder is gone.
So the emphasis is on building the enduring system, the clock itself, not just relying on the individual genius time teller.
Exactly. The system outlives the individual. It's the ultimate form of leverage, the true legacy. Building that clock is harder, but far more lasting.
General Motors under Alfred P. Sloan Jr. is another really fascinating historical example of this kind of systemic advantage in action, isn't it?
Indeed it is. Sloan's book, My Years with General Motors, reveals that GM's famous decentralized structure wasn't just some administrative convenience. It was absolutely key to its extraordinary ability to completely transform its operations during World War II.
How did decentralization help during the war?
Well, its various divisions, empowered by this systemic approach to management, could seek their own war contracts and adapt incredibly rapidly. Plus, the pre-war practice of doing yearly model changes had inadvertently fostered immense know-how and flexibility across the entire organization.
So they're used to adapting quickly.
Yeah, which allowed them to produce entirely new, highly complex military equipment, over $8 billion worth back then, even products they had absolutely no prior experience with. This adaptability wasn't down to one person. It was a systemic advantage, a built-in capacity to respond to radical shifts.
It's clear that building a robust system was critical for giants like GM. But what about a more, individualistic, almost maverick entrepreneur like Sam Walton? Surely he was more about individual drive.
Well, yes and no. Even Sam Walton, the ultimate hands-on entrepreneur, the face of Walmart, acknowledged the absolute systemic imperative for scaling his business.
Really? What did he say?
In his book, Sam Walton Made in America, Walton himself credits building a foundational system for distribution and putting data processing into stores really early on. He explicitly says these systemic investments really saved our bacon later on and enabled their incredible expansion.
So he knew he couldn't do it all himself.
Absolutely. He candidly admits, I surrounded myself with guys who were good at all the things I tended to just slough off, like organizing the company to handle the growth explosion. He clarifies it wasn't one magic formula for success, but rather focusing on all of them at once, all the time. That's a profoundly systemic view of growth and enduring success, even from someone we think of as a pure individualist.
And this systemic thinking goes beyond just top-level strategy and infrastructure, right? It affects how leadership itself is spread out.
It absolutely does. Blue Ocean Leadership by Kim and Mauborn makes a strong case for distributing leadership across all management levels, not just hoarding it at the top.
Why is that important?
Because, they argue, outstanding organizational performance often comes down to the motivation and actions of middle and frontline leaders who are in closer contact with the market and customers. It's a systemic approach to leadership development. You move beyond just training a few top executives and instead empower leadership capability throughout the entire organizational structure. You foster a collective, distributed ability to lead and adapt.
So shifting gears slightly, treating employees well, that isn't just a nice to have or an ethical thing anymore. It's actually a systemic performance enhancer.
Precisely. Howard Schultz, talking about Starbucks and pour your heart into it, makes a powerful business case for benevolence. He argues that treating employees benevolently shouldn't be viewed as an added cost, but as a powerful energizer that can grow the enterprise.
How does that work? What are the benefits?
Well, he points to Starbucks' remarkably low turnover rate, which saves huge amounts on recruitment and training. He talks about the strengthened bond with customers that comes from happy, engaged employees, and the deep emotional tie employees feel to the brand. All of these contribute to a stronger system that consistently outperforms competitors.
So it's not just about individual employees being more motivated in isolation.
No, it's about the systemic effect of a positive, supportive environment. It boosts morale, reduces friction, enhances overall productivity, and builds brand loyalty from the inside out. It's a system designed for positive human outcomes, which leads to positive business outcomes.
Okay, it seems like many of these insights focus on internal company systems. But what about the broader economic systems? Do they constrain individual companies and executives too? Can even the most effective individual transcend fundamental economic realities?
Generally, no. And Paul Krugman in A Country is Not a Company highlights a really fundamental difference between how business people and economists often view systems. Business people, understandably, tend to think in open systems. My company can just export more or import less, and that's that.
Right, focusing on their own piece of the puzzle.
But economists understand that aggregates, like national employment, function more like a closed system. Krugman explains that workers gaining jobs from increased exports must gain those positions at someone else's expense within that closed national system, assuming full employment. Similarly, a country's overall balance of payments must always be zero. Trade deficits are always offset by capital account imbalances.
So there are fundamental systemic constraints you just can't ignore.
Exactly. Individual company decisions, no matter how brilliant the CEO or management team, simply cannot bypass these larger economic laws. You operate within a bigger ecosystem with its own immutable rules.
That's a powerful reminder. There are these invisible yet unyielding forces at play. And in the world of finance, the market system itself often seems to defy individual genius, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Burton Malkiel's A Random Walk Down Wall Street makes a very compelling case that active managers must, on average, underperform the indexes by the amount of these expense and transactions cost disadvantages.
So trying to beat the market is usually a losing game.
On average, yes. The market, as a system, is just too efficient, too vast, too unpredictable, and too populated by other highly skilled individuals for most active managers to consistently beat it over the long haul. Melchiel quotes the legendary investor Jack Bogle, founder of Vanguard, who famously said, "I do not know of anybody who has done it market timing successfully and consistently."
That directly challenges the whole idea of individual stock-picking prowess consistently outperforming the aggregate system. Suggests the market's overall efficiency is the dominant force.
It really does. It implies the system itself often renders individual genius statistically irrelevant over time.
It even suggests our own irrationality isn't just random individual quirks, but can be systematic too.
Indeed. Dan Ariely's work in Predictably Irrational reveals this profound truth. Our irrational behaviors are neither random nor senseless. They are systematic and predictable. Our biases, our mental shortcuts, they follow patterns.
So even our mistakes are part of a system.
In a way, yes. And this understanding is key to things like nudge theory. It suggests that by subtly designing systems, for example, making the healthier food option the default or easier to reach, we can nudge individuals towards better decisions without restricting their freedom. So while we think of our choices as purely individual, those choices are often systematically influenced, maybe even steered by the surrounding environment, the choice architecture.
And finally, Hamilton-Helmer's 7 Powers framework really zeroes in on how an external strategic position, something systemic, can be far more decisive than individual innovation alone.
It really does.
Yeah.
Helmer emphasizes that a viable long-term strategy requires a business to possess at least one of 7 distinct power types things like scale economies, network effects, maybe counter-positioning against incumbents.
It's about having a durable competitive advantage built into the system.
Exactly. He gives the example of Intel. They made a decisive break from the peloton of competitors at a crucial time. He strongly suggests that if another company, maybe AMD or someone else, had won that pivotal IBM PC microprocessor contract back in the early days,
Yeah?
Intel as we know it today would not exist. This shows how strategic market position, a systemic element influenced by external factors, timing, competitive dynamics, can be more determinative than even brilliant individual innovation talent or the initial technological lead. A great individual idea needs a systemic opening or one of these powers to truly flourish and endure.
Wow. Okay, so ignoring these systemic forces is like trying to row upstream in a really strong current. You're just constantly expending energy, maybe just to stay in place or even slipping backwards.
That's a great analogy.
Understanding them, however, allows you to work with the current. To identify the crucial levers for change, build an environment where individual efforts are truly impactful rather than constantly frustrated. It's about building a better river, maybe, not just training a stronger rower.
Perfectly said.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. We've just explored the sheer force of individual will, Drucker's effective executive, and then the undeniable gravity of the system, all these external forces and structures. But the truth is, it's almost never just one or the other in isolation, is it?
Rarely, if ever.
So I'm genuinely curious, how do these two powerful forces actually dance together in the real world? How do individuals shape systems? And then how do systems in turn shape individuals? It feels like a loop.
It absolutely is a loop. And that interplay is continuous. Think about how individuals can kickstart systemic change. Satya Nadella's book, Hit Refresh, is a perfect illustration of this at Microsoft. Well, his individual vision as the new CEO, his aggressive push for a cloud-first transformation that went directly against Amazon's huge early lead, and also against Microsoft's deeply entrenched, highly profitable software licensing business model. It was a huge bet driven by his conviction.
And that individual leadership then reshaped the system.
Exactly. It reshaped the entire organizational system, its culture, its priorities, its resource allocation, how it measured success, which then enabled countless individual engineers and teams to innovate and thrive within that new strategic direction, building Azure and other cloud services. It started with an individual's vision, but it manifested as a massive systemic overhaul.
So an individual's entrepreneurial drive needs a system that's built to support it, not stifle it. They need each other.
Precisely. And the essential Drucker actually points this out. For existing enterprises, often the existing is the main obstacle to entrepreneurship. It's not usually a lack of individual ideas, it's the inertia, the resistance of the existing system.
So how do you overcome that?
Drucker argued that to be truly entrepreneurial and adaptable, a business must actively build entrepreneurial management into its own system. This means creating policies that create the desire to innovate and the habits of entrepreneurship.
So it's where individuals drive the desire to innovate meets systemic enablement, the habits and policies that actually support and reward it.
Exactly. One without the other is severely limited. An innovative individual stuck in a rigid system will likely get frustrated and leave. A flexible system without innovative individuals will just remain stagnant. They have to work together.
And Blue Ocean strategy fits beautifully here too, right? It feels like it starts with individual insight, but then requires profound systemic change to actually bring it to life.
Couldn't agree more. Kim and Mauborn's Blue Ocean strategy argues for value innovation, not just pure technology innovation. This requires individual insight, creativity, a willingness to reconstruct market boundaries, break away from the bloody red ocean of competition.
But the insight alone isn't enough.
Not at all. The success of that individual insight utterly depends on the organization's systemic ability to implement entirely new business models, rethink its value chain, reallocate resources, and actually capture that new value. Think about companies like Starbucks. Again, they created a blue ocean, not just with new tech, but by linking technology to a radically redesigned customer experience. Focusing on simplicity, ambiance, ease of use in their offerings, that's a systemic design choice that allowed individual baristas to deliver a whole new kind of service and value proposition.
This sounds like a constant iterative process of adaptation, almost like a living organism evolving to fit its environment.
It really is. And strategic flexibility talks about firms needing to be in a dynamic capability building mode, basically constantly working to renew, augment, and adapt its core competence over time.
Like building an immune system for your business.
That's a great way to put it. Constantly adapting, evolving to fight off new threats and embrace new opportunities. This isn't a one-time fix. It requires ongoing managerial capabilities and organizational resources just to handle the paradoxical tensions between core upgrading and core building. You have to improve what you have while building the next thing.
So it's this continuous interaction between individual strategic choices made by leaders and the system's inherent capacity for change and renewal. The individual makes the choices, but the system dictates the capacity for agile execution.
Precisely. One enables or constrains the other.
That feedback loop, then, learning from what happens, mistakes and successes, must be absolutely critical to this dance between individual and system. How do organizations truly bake that learning process in?
It's vital and often very difficult. Ray Dalio's Principles, Life and Work describes Bridgewater Associates' approach, which is famously built around this iterative, evolutionary process, both for individual learning and for systemic refinement.
What does that look like in practice?
He talks about constantly wrestling with the markets, thinking independently and creatively, making mistakes, bringing those mistakes to the surface, diagnosing them to get at the root causes, designing new and better ways of doing things, systematically implementing the changes, making new mistakes, and so on.
So it's a continuous cycle. Act, make mistakes, diagnose, redesign the system, implement, act again.
Exactly. It's a constant dance between individual action, the independent thinking, the creative bets, the diagnosis of errors, and systemic refinement, where those insights are designed into new and better ways of doing things and systematically implemented into processes, algorithms, policies. He even views painful problems as potential improvements that are screaming at you. A true, if sometimes brutal, feedback loop.
I love Jim Collins's red flag system as another, maybe more specific example of a feedback loop that empowers individuals to improve the system they're in.
Oh, indeed. In turning goals into results, Collins describes this red flag system he implemented in his own work and teaching. Team members could, without fear of reprisal, halt unproductive discussions or challenge leadership decisions simply by raising a metaphorical or sometimes real red flag.
And he shares a story about it being used on him.
Yeah, he tells this great anecdote where a student actually used the red flag system to tell him, Professor Collins, that he was leading too much with his questions and stifling independent thinking during a class discussion.
Wow, that takes guts.
It does. But that individual act, which was enabled and protected by a systemic mechanism, the red flag system itself, led directly to collective improvement in the class's dynamic. It empowered an individual to directly, constructively, and fearlessly improve the system for everyone involved.
So the system can even dictate how we hold each other accountable. And sometimes technology complicates this whole accountability piece too, doesn't it?
Yes. And sometimes technology, ironically, can actually hinder true collective accountability, even as it boosts individual productivity. The discipline of teams discusses this. They point out how groupware technology, things like shared documents or project management software, while enhancing individual efficiency, can inadvertently endanger mutual accountability.
How so? By making things too individual.
Yeah, it often leads to a one-person, one-task mentality, even when a truly collective work product is desperately needed. While tech can streamline individual contributions, it needs really careful design and cultural reinforcement to foster the shared understanding and, importantly, the emotional commitment required for true team effectiveness. They often suggest initial in-person meetings are still crucial to build that foundational trust and common purpose that purely remote tech interaction might unintentionally erode.
So if the system, even inadvertently through its tools, encourages individual silos or reduces that personal interaction and debate, that can fundamentally break down real team accountability.
Exactly. Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team reinforces this so powerfully. He highlights that just as no one person can fail in a real team, It is also true that no one person is allowed to cause the team to fail.
Meaning,
It points to this deep shared responsibility within the team system. Individual actions are not only supported and corrected by the collective, but the collective also has a systemic responsibility to not let any single individual's actions derail the whole enterprise. It's a very delicate but crucial balance. The system has to support both individual contribution and collective success.
okay, this brings us to a really important, maybe slightly uncomfortable question that should make us all pause.
Uh-oh.
How much of our perception of individual genius, individual skill, is actually influenced, perhaps even created, by just systemic luck, being in the right place at the right time within a favorable system?
The role of luck. Yes, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow really forces us to confront this. He cautions us strongly against the hindsight bias, looking back and seeing successes as inevitable, and the narrative fallacy, our tendency to construct overly tidy, coherent stories about why things happened.
We love a good hero story, don't we?
We absolutely do. But Kahneman argues that we tend to attribute outcomes, especially big successes, to individual skill and strategic brilliance, when in reality, the comparison of firms that have been more or less successful is to a significant extent a comparison between firms that have been more or less lucky.
Ouch. That's a bit humbling.
It really is. He notes that in the presence of randomness, regular patterns can only be mirages. This means we might inadvertently, maybe even systematically, overemphasize individual contributions when the system was simply favorable, or when random chance played a far greater unrecognized role than we like to admit. It forces us to question the very narratives of success we tell ourselves and read about.
That is a profound observation. It really shifts our focus, doesn't it? From just admiring the hero to carefully examining the stage upon which they performed, including the lighting and maybe even the trapdoors. Understanding this dynamic interplay is just crucial.
It is.
It means not falling into the easy trap of blaming individuals for what are actually systemic failures, but also not ignoring individual accountability by solely blaming the system for everything. It's about seeing the intricate, continuous dance between individual agency and the encompassing environment.
Well said.
So let's bring this home. What does this all mean for you, the listener? How do you take these really profound insights about the individual and the system and actually apply them in your own world, whether you're leading a team, managing a project, or just trying to navigate your own career path? This isn't just theory. It has to be about tangible action, right?
Absolutely. Let's start with your own individual effectiveness, drawing directly from Drucker's enduring legacy. First, you've got to master self-management. Adopt Drucker's rigorous practices. Clearly define your contributions, what results are expected of you. Ruthlessly prioritize your tasks, really aim for just one or two main things at a time to avoid splintering your focus, and concentrate your energy on your unique strengths.
And make it a regular practice, maybe uncomfortable, but regular, to ask yourself and your colleagues, what do I do that wastes others' time without contributing to their effectiveness? That self-awareness and discipline are foundational.
And remember Daniel Goleman's insights here too. Cultivate your emotional intelligence. Work actively on your self-awareness, your self-regulation, your social skills. Understand not just what you feel, but how your emotions impact your work, your decisions, your relationships. Be genuinely open to feedback, even when it stings, and commit to continuous learning. Recognize that these crucial skills grow over time. They aren't fixed.
Also, if you're in a leadership role, even an informal one, practice stewardship delegation, like Stephen Covey advocates. Don't just assign tasks. Delegate by clearly defining the desired results and the guidelines or boundaries. Empower your team members to manage their own stewardships, trusting them with the autonomy to achieve outcomes.
But, and this is key, provide the necessary training and support to build their competence along the way. Remember, trust is powerful, but it needs to be built on capability and clear mutual understanding. It's an investment.
Okay, now for improving your system. The insights from Beyond Drucker are absolutely critical here. First and foremost, maybe the biggest takeaway. Diagnose the system first. Before you jump to blaming individuals for poor performance or lack of initiative, step back. Critically examine the processes, the structures, the incentives, the cultural norms that might actually be driving that behavior.
Yeah, as Guy Kawasaki advises in The Art of the Start 2.0, when someone doesn't execute, don't just assume they're lazy or incompetent. Identify the real reason. There may be problems that were out of his control. Fix the root cause, which often lies hidden within the system, not just the symptom you see in the individual.
Next, empower all levels of your organization. Don't hoard decision-making power at the top. Implement ideas from blue ocean leadership by actively seeking and genuinely valuing input from your middle and frontline leaders. They often know what's really going on.
And distribute decision-making authority to where the information and the problems truly reside, like the Navy SEALs do in extreme ownership. This decentralization fosters adaptability, faster response times, and a much stronger collective sense of ownership throughout the organization.
And critically, organizations cannot afford to stay static in today's world. You have to build for dynamic change. Recognize that those comfortable organizational routines, while efficient yesterday, can quickly become rigid, core rigidities tomorrow.
So actively seek to build entrepreneurial management into your system, as Drucker himself suggested. Foster dynamic capabilities, as strategic flexibility calls them, to continuously renew and adapt your core competencies over time. Don't be like those companies in the innovator's dilemma that missed the next wave of change because their system just couldn't pivot fast enough.
And this one feels more important than ever? Prioritize employee well-being and connection. Create a work environment where people feel genuinely valued, respected, psychologically safe, and have an emotional connection to the company's mission and, just as importantly, to their colleagues.
Exactly. As Starbucks found, treating employees benevolently isn't just an added cost or a nice thing to do. It's a powerful energizer. It boosts performance, dramatically reduces costly turnover, strengthens customer relationships, and ultimately makes the entire organizational system more resilient and successful. It creates a virtuous cycle of engagement and results.
And finally, don't forget the world outside your own walls. Be acutely aware of economic and market dynamics. Understand that your company operates within larger closed systems, as Paul Krugman describes them. You face specific, often unyielding competitive forces. Think about the Seven Powers framework from Helmer, or Michael Porter's insights on industry structure.
You absolutely have to tailor your strategy not just to your internal capabilities, but to these external realities. Don't fall prey to marketing myopia, assuming your product or service is indispensable without deeply understanding the broader market context, the competitive landscape, and the underlying economic currents.
So at the end of the day, it seems the most profound and impactful changes often come from a deep, nuanced understanding of how individual actions are enabled or constrained by the system, and vice versa, and how systems can be intentionally designed to foster individual excellence.
It's really not about choosing one over the other, is it? It's an ongoing, iterative process. Individual growth informs systemic refinement, and systemic refinement enables greater individual contribution. It's a constant feedback loop between agency and environment.
The question isn't whether to focus on individuals or systems, but how do we best ensure they are harmonized? How do we make sure each is elevating the other?
Exactly. We've seen today that this debate between the individual and the system isn't a simple binary choice at all, but a really complex, dynamic interplay. Peter F. Drucker powerfully shows us the profound agency and the non-delegable responsibility of the individual. He highlights how personal discipline, focus, ethical conduct, these things are vital.
But then numerous other sources brilliantly illuminate how the systems we create, everything from organizational structure and leadership distribution to economic forces and market dynamics, profoundly shape, empower, or restrict that very individual potential.
So this raises a really important, maybe even provocative thought for you to ponder.
Okay, let's hear it.
If even our individual human behaviors are systematically predictable, as Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational suggests, and if organizations are built on routines that can inevitably lead to core rigidities, as strategic flexibility points out, then how much of our perceived free will at work is truly individual choice?
And how much is simply a reflection, maybe an unconscious reflection, of the systems we're embedded in and day out?
Exactly. And if we start to understand that, what new responsibilities do we then have, both as individuals and as leaders? Responsibilities to consciously design better systems that liberate potential rather than limit it. And responsibilities to actively challenge and maybe even break free from those unhelpful systems that hold us and others back.
That's a powerful thought to leave with. So take a moment, maybe after this, to reflect on your own environment. Think about your team, your company, even just your daily tasks. Where do you see individuals shining through, perhaps despite a less than optimal system?
And conversely, where do you see highly capable, talented individuals struggling against systemic obstacles that seem beyond their personal control? What's one small step you could take, either personally in how you manage yourself and your focus, or within your organization and how you influence processes or culture, to better harmonize the incredible power of the individual with the foundational strength of the system?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into one of management's most enduring and, I think, crucial questions. We genuinely hope these insights empower you to think a little differently, lead more effectively, and maybe act with greater purpose in your own world.
We look forward to exploring more fascinating topics with you next time on The Deep Dive.